Anne, do you have,
Yeah.
are you
Yes.
going to open us
Yes.
up?
Yeah, I would love to. All right, thanks. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our November 2020 general meeting. We're fortunate tonight to be joined by longtime and now lifetime member, VHOC member Stephanie Coleman. And she was a former board member. Many of you, I'm sure, will remember her tenure on the board. And also fortunate to have guide dog graduate Tom Olzak tonight. Stephanie is a puppy program coordinator at Guide Dogs of America, where she blends her professional background in both nonprofit, public relations, and dog training to help recruit and support the many volunteers needed each year to raise and train the organization's service dog prospects. And she's always looking for new puppy raisers. Hint, hint. We'll hear a little about the history of the organization and its recent evolution to include training not only guide dogs for people who are blind and visually impaired, but also service dogs for military veterans, children on the autism spectrum, and facility dogs. She's joined tonight by Tom Olzak, Guide Goliath. Tom is a two-time GDA program graduate and organization board member, and we look forward to hearing how each of his guide dogs have changed his life. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Stephanie.
Awesome.
Stephanie and Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne, for that lovely introduction. And thank you all out there in the audience for spending some of your time with us this evening. We're super excited to tell you more about our program. I know some of you, if you were at the awards banquet a couple of years ago, you were actually on the GDA campus. So we're excited to tell you a little bit about some of the changes that have happened since you've been there. To go ahead and kick off and get us started. So as a, whoops, come on now. Nope, there we go. So the organization, now that we have merged with Tender Loving Canines, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but our overall mission is really to transform lives through service dogs. Now, my role in the organization is to recruit puppy raisers to raise puppies on the guide dog side. And when we think about guide dogs, really what a trained guide dog is going to provide for its partner, it's really there to empower that person to live with increased confidence, independence, and mobility. And I think later, as we have an opportunity to hear from Tom, he'll really be able to help us better understand just sort of how that happens. But I can say, having been with the organization for a little more than 3 years at this point, I am just continually amazed by just the really wonderful stories that I hear from our graduates, and just the many ways that these highly skilled guide dogs are making such a difference in their partners' lives. A little bit about kind of our background. So the organization was actually founded in 1948 as International Guiding Eyes. And it came to be because at the time there was a machinist by the name of Joseph Jones who lost his vision. Now, he went out in search of a guide dog, and all of the guide dog programs in existence at that time said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're too old to receive a guide dog." Now, Joseph Jones was only 57. So he was actually a member of a machinists union, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. He went back to his union. His union effectively said, well, that's not okay. And they actually founded International Guiding Eyes, which later became Guide Dogs of America as we know it today. And to this day, the IAM continues to be an amazing supporter, and their contributions, all of the different locals across the country do a number of wonderful fundraisers throughout the year. And those fundraisers actually make up a huge percentage of our budget. So we remain extraordinarily grateful for their support. And Guide Dogs of America actually remains one of the only guide dog programs in the country that does not have an upper age limit for the students that we accept into our program. So I've seen graduation ceremonies where in that class of 10, we've had a 20-year-old college student getting their first guide dog, and an 84-year-old retiree also getting their first guide dog. Now, if you've not been to our campus, we are located in Sylmar on Glen Oaks Boulevard. And when you drive down the street, you'd have no idea that you were driving past a beautiful 7.5-acre park-like campus. When you're on the campus, it's quite a sight to behold, if I may say. People are often surprised, once they pull into campus and see what it looks like from the inside. We've got a breeding center on campus. We have a kennel facility that can house up to 144 dogs. We've got a full veterinary facility. We've got a large visitor education center. For those of you who were at our campus for the annual awards banquet a couple of years ago, we were in the visitor education center. An administrative complex, and then also a 14-room dormitory where clients, when they come to receive their guide dogs, they actually live on our campus for 3 weeks. Now, as a service dog organization, we trained exclusively guide dogs until January of this year, following a successful merger with another service dog program called Tender Loving Canines Assistance Dogs. Now, Tender Loving Canines, or TLC, as we like to call them for short, they specialize in training military veterans with PTSD, or excuse me, training assistance dogs for military veterans with PTSD. They train dogs for children on the autism spectrum, and they train facility dogs, which are task-trained service dogs that are then partnered with a professional handler, and then that dog and handler team will serve, a number of different at-risk populations. So that could be your professional courthouse dog. We have a facility dog working with the Sexual Assault Response Unit at Vandenberg Air Force Base. So there's a number of different roles that the facility dogs can fill. The TLC program is actually a prison program. So the way that that works is very carefully screened inmates are brought into the program, and they spend quite a long time learning how to successfully train dogs using all positive reinforcement training methods. Once they learn how to successfully train a dog, then they're matched with a dog to train. And then they're the ones that are actually doing all of the service dog training. So it's really about like a double transformation, right? It's an opportunity to rehabilitate the inmate, and then also help change the life of the recipient of that service dog. And at this time, that program is active in Mule Creek State Prison, which is up north in Ione, California. The Brig Base down south at Camp Pendleton, and then a little farther down south at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. Now, there are extraordinarily high standards to get into the program, to stay in the program. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent talking about that program itself. There's a possibility that we may be able to do a follow-up meeting with the TLC side of the program. But one of the most impressive things that I find is that among the inmate participants, there is a 0 recidivism rate. Now, the director of that program is very humble, and she always likes to say, yes, that's true. Now, we're usually bringing people into the program because of the high standards. Statistically, the participants may have been less likely to recidivate to begin with. But I always say that's not giving the program enough credit. I think it's hugely impressive that there is a 0 recidivism rate among participants of the service dog training program. So kind of some basics. We are a purpose-bred program, which means we breed all of our own dogs. We are producing about 160 dogs per year that we produce on our campus in Sylmar. We're also part of a nationwide breeding co-op where the simplest way to describe it is that service dog schools participate in the co-op and can essentially sort of trade puppies, which is how we create and maintain genetic diversity in our breeding stock. We breed primarily labs, followed by lab golden crosses. We do some purebred goldens and some purebred German shepherds, but the majority of our dogs are labs. And we have in the service dog industry, we really kind of have created what we sort of call a guide dog lab. I jokingly call it a third gear lab because compared to what those of you out there who have sport dog labs, what you might look for in a competition obedience lab or an agility lab, our labs are very different. Our ideal lab is going to go through life most of the time, maxing out at about third gear. Occasionally, Mother Nature will throw us more of a fifth gear lab, that likes to get things done a little bit faster and that, and might have considerably more drive. And those are often dogs that will get career changed and go on to do quite well, maybe in search and rescue, or go on to work for law enforcement in some role, maybe as a detection dog. At any given time, we have about 175 puppies in puppy raiser homes throughout Southern California. And then now we have about an additional 60 dogs in our TLC program. As an organization, we graduate about 60 working guide dog teams per year. And we do that through 5 classes of 10. So 5 times a year, we'll bring up to 10 students to our campus in Sylmar, where they will live with us for 3 weeks, learning how to live with and work with their highly skilled guide dog companions. And then we aim to do about an additional 10 in-home trainings, which is where if we have a client who is maybe receiving a subsequent guide dog, so they're an experienced guide dog user, but for some reason, they're not able to fly to campus and be away from home for 3 weeks. Maybe it's an issue with the family where it just doesn't work to be away for 3 weeks, or they can't get 3 weeks off of work. We can also serve clients in home where we will send a trainer and a dog out to their home, and they'll actually conduct the training in their home environment. And then at this time, we're graduating about 20 service dog teams per year on the TLC side. Now we estimate that from start to finish, between the breeding, raising, training, matching the team, all of that, it costs about $60,000 per every working team that we put into service. And we do not charge clients at all to receive the dog. Everything from we'll fly them to campus. There's no charge for room and board. If a client actually lives within driving distance of our campus, we'll continue to provide basic vet care. And that is, we're also not funded. We don't receive any state or federal funding. So that comes entirely from the union support, private donations, grant writing, things like that. So all of our guide dog puppies begin in puppy raiser homes. They go home with their volunteer puppy raisers when they're about 8 weeks old. Our TLC, our service dog puppies, right now they're being raised in that prison environment. So they meet their inmate trainer in the prison when they're 8 weeks old. Our guide dog puppies return to our Sylmar campus to begin formal training at about 16 months old. And on the tender loving canine side, that formal training also will happen in prison. It takes about 4 to 6 months to teach the formal guide dog skills to the puppies who return to our Sylmar campus. Some dogs take a little bit longer, but regardless, when the dog's considered what we call class ready, when it's essentially passed its final exams, then we are basically working on finding that, the right and perfect person for that dog. And on the client side, there's a number of different things that go into making that good match. It could be everything from the height of the client to the height of the dog, their pace, how quickly do they move, where do they live? Some dogs are going to do better, in a quieter environment versus the dog that can go, I can totally handle life in Midtown Manhattan. Let's do it. Some clients are going to prefer different dog temperaments. So some clients want the dog that when they sit down on the floor, that dog just climbs in their lap and tries to climb in their soul. And some clients are going to want, a dog that's not quite like that, and all of that's fine, right? We all have different personalities. It's the same thing with the dogs. It's all about finding that right match. On the service dog side, it takes about 2 years for the dog to grow up and train to the point where it's ready to be matched with a client. And the TLC program will actually pre-match dogs to clients. So all of the dogs learn a standard number of service dog cues, sort of the basics, and there's a variety of different, standard service dog cues that they'll all learn. And then depending on the specific client to whom the dog will be matched, then there's oftentimes some finishing training that will need to take place. So for instance, if they identify that, dog A is a great match for this particular military veteran client, maybe that client tends to, when they hear the sound of a plane or a helicopter, they'll search the sky and start to feel really anxious. So that particular dog, for example, might be taught, when I see my person look up and searching the sky, that behavior of the person actually becomes the cue for the dog to start performing some sort of trained service dog behavior that's designed to reduce that anxiety. So there's a lot of sort of personalized training that will go into sort of finishing the dog and making sure that it's, going to be a really effective service dog for its particular partner. Of course, not every dog's going to make it. We all know, as dog lovers and dog sport enthusiasts, sometimes we bring home a dog that we think is going to be our amazing, top-notch competition dog. And as we go through training, we discover that there's something about that dog that, maybe it's not going to perform in quite the way we had hoped. And, yes, while training can overcome a lot of things, at the end of the day, sometimes a dog's just not going to meet the particular goal that we had in mind. On the guide dog side, statistically, it's a little under half of the dogs that go on, with the intention to become guide dogs that actually successfully finish a program and become working guide dogs. And there's a number of different reasons why a dog might not be successful. It could be anything from medical, right? We're not going to put a dog into service if it has, an issue with its hips or its elbows or its eyes. So we do quite a bit of medical testing before we'll put a dog into service. Sometimes we lose dogs for things like reoccurring allergy issues. It's not fair to ask a dog, to take on a job where it's making really, really important decisions about how to keep that team safe, when maybe it's, getting ear infections. And, we know if you got something and you're just not feeling quite right, it just can throw you a little bit off your game. And if that's a dog who may suddenly have to make a very important decision about not stepping off the curb to cross that street because they hear, or they see rather an electric car that maybe their partner didn't hear, and that car is about to run that red light or make a right turn on a red, we can't afford to have that dog be a little bit off its game. Oftentimes, and sometimes we'll just have a dog who, is doing all the work, and it's doing all the guide dog work, but we just feel like that's not the right fit for the dog. Sort of the joke among the industry is that guide dogs are kind of the astronauts of the service dog world. And not everybody wants to be an astronaut, and that's totally okay. One of the really nice things about our merger, about GDA having absorbed the TLC program, is that now, if we're releasing a dog from the guide dog program for, maybe not a medical reason, but something about that dog's temperament, something about the dog that made it not a strong candidate to be a guide dog, but it's a dog with a great work ethic and a dog that could still potentially be successful as a service dog, we have an opportunity to help that dog change its major and maybe successfully still go on to become a service dog for a veteran, a child on the autism spectrum, or maybe become a facility dog. So as someone who feels very strongly about trying to, reduce the number of pet dogs we're creating, I'm really excited, to know that we now have this opportunity for the dogs. On the service dog, still though, not every dog is going to become a service dog if it's released for a medical reason. Or any type of service dog work is still considerably more stressful than life as a pet dog. So if we have a situation where a dog's not designed to be a guide dog, maybe it's not, thriving on the service dog side either, then we will career change that dog, and the dog has an opportunity to be adopted by its puppy raiser. So every dog that we bring into this world ultimately ends up in a fantastic home. If for whatever reason the puppy raiser is not able to adopt the dog, we maintain an extraordinarily long waiting list of people who are looking to adopt what we call our career change dogs. And by extraordinarily long, I mean it's like 5 to 7 years. So there are plenty of people looking to provide our dogs with fantastic homes. And we take that responsibility very seriously. So when we think about what kind of work a guide dog is going to do, we kind of come back to that idea of a guide dog is really going to empower its partner. It's about providing increased confidence, independence, mobility. And the guide dogs do that by assisting their partners in a number of different ways. It's avoiding obstacles, anything from, things that we as people who are sighted overlook all the stinking time. Everything from you're walking down the street and someone is parked in their driveway, but they're parked out just enough that the back end of their car is blocking the sidewalk, right? If you're sighted, you think nothing about cruising right past that. Or maybe somebody has their trash can out, or there's a giant gnarly crack or whatever in the sidewalk, or a low-hanging tree branch, right? It's really easy to overlook just how many obstacles are out there. And the dogs are taught to help their person safely avoid those. The dogs are also taught to stop at a variety of different elevation changes. So that could be the curb, it could be stairs, a train platform, things like that. The dogs assist with street crossings. The dogs assist with finding, major entry and exit points, finding elevators. So there's a number of different ways that the dog is providing assistance and support to their partner. Now, I always jokingly say the dog is not a GPS unit. So the dog does not know, how to get from point A to point B. It's not like you walk out the front door and say, hey, guide dog, take me to Starbucks. It's the person's job to actually know how to get from point A to point B. And the dog's job is to make sure that the team can get there safely. And I think the biggest difference, and Tom will probably talk about this a little bit later, there's a big difference between using a cane and using a guide dog. And actually, effective cane skills are required to come into our program and receive a dog. But when a person who's blind is navigating with a cane, the whole purpose of that cane is to sort of tap out and find the dangerous thing. Like, what's going to trip me up? Tap, tap, tap. You walk down the street and you're moving that cane side to side. You're looking for the thing that's going to get in your way. And I can only imagine how exhausting that must be. And we hear clients report back all the time that, once they completed the program and they were now navigating through the world with a dog rather than a cane, they were kind of able to relax and maybe be a little bit more engaged in conversation if they were walking with somebody. Or, clients have reported that they suddenly realized that now when they're walking down the street with their guide dog, they can hear birds, or they can hear the sound of kids playing on a nearby playground. Things that they missed when they were using a cane because they were so hyper-focused. They had to be so hyper-focused on, using that cane to prevent running into something. And, now with a dog, especially once they're a well-seasoned team, they completely trust that the dog's just going to cruise them, past and through all that stuff. So that brings us to our guest tonight, Tom Olzak with guide dog Goliath. You see them pictured here. Goliath is Tom's second guide dog. His first guide dog was Wrigley. Goliath was born in January of 2014, and Tom and Goliath graduated the program together in 2016. We're super excited to have you here, Tom. And I'm thinking maybe if you would, maybe open with telling us a little bit about yourself and how you decided to get a guide dog.
Well, good evening, Stephanie, and thank you for allowing me to be here and meet all you folks today. I appreciate it. I wanted to get a guide dog, and it was really by serendipity. I lost my eyesight late in life. I lost it when I was 41. And I'd been using a cane for 13 years. I was working at the Braille Institute at that time as the Youth and Career Services Director, and I met a gentleman then in a support group who was just losing his eyesight. And he called me one day and said, hey, listen, they're having a California Council of the Blind convention, and I want to go, so let's go. And I told him, I said, well, listen, dude, I'm going to be very honest with you. My idea of fun is not being in a hotel with 1,500 people with white canes beating on me, so I really don't want to go. And he said, okay, well, all right. And then I felt bad. So anyway, make a long story short, we went. There were 3 guide dog schools there, and I talked to Ms. Crusoe, who was in charge of all the admissions and that. She had a booth there, and we talked about it. And I asked her, I said, how good can it get? Because I'm using a cane, here I am. So how much better can it get? And she told me she couldn't tell me. But she said, I have a gentleman here who is our head trainer, and maybe he can tell you. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know what I've got this tickle about. But anyway, his name is Bob Wendler. He came out and we started talking, and he said the same thing. I can't tell you. And I went, well, real good. This is good. He says, but I've got a guide dog here named Flight, and he really likes to work. So he said, how would you like to test drive a dog? So I did. The interesting thing is that we were at the LAX Marriott on Century Boulevard there. We went across the street, and he told me how to hang on to the harness, gave me a few commands, like the normal, flight forward, flight halt, that kind of stuff. And I said, okay. So I held on to the handle, and I said, flight forward. Now, Flight was a big German Shepherd. He weighed in at 105 pounds, and his name Flight was really apropos, because when I said forward, I thought that I was just going to take a little stroll. That didn't work out. I mean, Flight, all of a sudden, I never realized how strong a dog could be until Flight said, okay, let's go. And my left arm went straight out, and I started looking like Ichabod Crane there at the beginning, trying to stay with him, Anyway, I got the hang of it, and we walked for about 45 minutes. And I was in a suit, a tie, and all that good stuff, white shirt. And when I got done, I had sweat through my white shirt, my tie I could literally wring out. And I was flabbergasted. And I told the guy, I said, this was the first time in 13 years I felt the wind in my face, and it wasn't because the wind was blowing. I had made up my mind right then and there that I was going to get a guide dog. And I went through all of the application processes. And as you stated earlier, I had to show them that I had good certified orientation and mobility skills, etc. And I got my first guide dog, Wrigley, who was a really, he was like the tank between him and Goliath. I know Goliath sounds like he's a massive dog, but he's not. But Wrigley was a cross between a yellow lab and a golden retriever, and he weighed in his prime 90 pounds. He's a big guy, and he was a tank. But he was my first guide dog, and he was my first partner.
Wow. Yeah. And how long were you partnered with Wrigley, Tom?
Wrigley was my partner for 12 and a half years, which is an extremely long time for a guide dog. Normally, a guide dog, his working life or her working life will be anywhere from 9 to 10 years old, right in that neighborhood. Because literally, you put a lot of stress on these dogs. Now, I can, like even with Goliath today, I can go out and do my walk in the morning, and it's a pretty straight walk and all that good stuff, and there's not a lot of obstacles. We're just on the sidewalk boogieing, and we can do 3-4 miles, and he won't even break a sweat. But if we're like, when we go to Las Vegas, or when I go to the mall or something like that, where there are a lot of people, there's a lot of noises and all that good stuff, Goliath is making a lot of decisions. He works hard. So I may walk with him for about 45 minutes. And when we get back to the room or whatever, he's tired. So we brush him, and then we play with him for a little bit and horse around with him, and then all of a sudden he's ready to go rock and roll again. But when you're in a place like that, a mall or something like that, or like in Vegas, how when you're there with all the noises and the ding 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 and all these people, he's constantly making decisions so that I won't run into somebody, that we get around people, he gets me around obstacles, whatever. So it's a lot of work for a guide dog to make all of those decisions. And I have been blessed with Wrigley and Goliath, and they have been fantastic.
Vegas exhausts me. I'm exhausted just trying to get from point A to point B when I'm in Vegas.
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah, the dog's definitely doing a lot of work there for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about, I always love the story, the way you talk about a guide dog being a forced multiplier. And I don't want to ask all the questions, so I'm just going to ask you a couple, and then we're going to see what we have from the audience. But
Okay.
your forced multiplier story always hits me in the feels. So let's give that to the crowd tonight.
All righty. You know, Stephanie was telling you basically what guide dogs do for the person, such as me. I'm the end user, right? So I'm the one that is going to be able to walk independently. I'm the one that's going to be able to walk safely and lead a better quality of life and things like that. But what we don't talk about is the intangibles. And what I mean when I say that a guide dog is a force multiplier is that it's an old military term, but it basically means he does more than one thing. It's kind of like, you know, in baseball where you have a utility player where he can play second base, shortstop, third base, outfield, whatever, but he's always there and he can affect the game in different ways. How does that work? How does Goliath or Wrigley become a force multiplier? I'll tell you a quick story. Before I got a guide dog, all right, and I'm in my 40s and all that good stuff, and I had to change my career, so I was going back to college, and I would have to walk down to the bus stop, and I would, you know, coming home, I would have to cross 6 lanes of a street, cross that, and then walk so that I could get home. My wife was paranoid every time I left the house. I mean, literally paranoid. I found this out later, but she knew when she was a school teacher, so she was home when I got home from school. And what I didn't know was that she would drive down to the corner and sit in the car, watch me get out of the bus, watch me cross the street. And then when I walked by her, she would start the car and zoom around the block and get home and then go in the house and sit there like she had never left.
Oh, you're home.
Now, you know, when I think about it now is, I mean, you know, if I was going to Banana out, and what she was worried about is I was going to end up going out in the middle of the intersection, get hit by a car. And I'm not sure what she would have done sitting there watching me get hit by a car, but she was there because she was a nervous wreck about whether I was going to be able to cross that street. Two things changed that whole aspect. They were Wrigley forward. She knew that when I said Wrigley forward and I was crossing that street, that he was going to take me directly across the street. He was not going to let anything happen to me. If he saw a car or I said forward and he saw that it was unsafe, it's a thing that they call intelligent disobedience. And if I said forward and he saw it was unsafe, he's not going. And if I tried to press him, he'll walk in front of me. So she knew from that point on, when I had that dog, I was going to be able to walk safely. Now, here's the part where it's the force multiplier and what it did for my wife. From that point on, she no longer worried about me. She no longer had that fear. She no longer was sitting on pins and needles waiting for me to get home, hearing that little tap or whatever to get home. She knew that I was going to get home. And, you know, it was funny because she used to drop me off at the airport. And I mean, she would take me up to the sky cap and she would, I was almost like a little kid all over. Now that I've got a guide dog, both Wrigley and Goliath, she kind of slows down where the sky cap is and says, on the count of 3, open the door, tuck and roll, you guys are out of here. And then she leaves and that's that. So it's really changed her life. It's changed the life of my daughter and my grandkids because now they know that their grandpa can get out there and enjoy. It's changed the way that I interact with my friends because now you know, I have friends, not just friends that are blind or visually impaired, but just friends, you know, that, you know, before when they said, oh, geez, we're going to have to take him with us and we're going to have to drag him around. Now they got to keep up with me when we go to places because we're moving that quickly.
Yeah.
So it's really changed a lot of things, Stephanie, in that way. And that's why I say he's a force multiplier. He affects the lives of so many other people other than me. And I think it's important for people to understand that these guide dogs do much, much more than just affect the life of the end user.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story. I will never get tired of that story. That's a good one. Yep, definitely. Well, Anne, I'd like to check in with you at this point. Do we have questions from the audience? I don't want to hog all the Q&A time. I could sit and,
Well,
interview Tom for hours, but
we have a few comments, but I do have a question or two here that one of them was, so is Goliath on duty all the time, or are there moments where he's off duty?
That's funny that you asked that. No, Goliath is a clown. No, Goliath is not on duty all the time. Here's the difference in what people can understand. When Goliath is in his harness, okay, when he's in that special harness, he is on duty and he's working. That's when you know you leave the dog alone. But here's what we do, and this was taught to me from the very first time that I got my first guide dog. It's like people, you work hard. He works hard getting me around. And so you work hard. When you come home, you want to play, right? And then you get something to eat and you relax. Same thing with a guide dog. I come home, and here's the way that it works. I come home, I take Goliath out of his harness. Now he's on a leash, and now he's a puppy dog. And when we go out in the backyard, I have a table that he jumps up on, and then I brush him for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. I think it's one of the most important things I do with him, because I put my hands on the dog and I brush him. And I think, because you can hear him purring, I know it sounds like a cat, but you can hear him as I'm using the Zoom groom on him, and he knows I love him. And that's one of the important things with a dog, is that you let them know that you love them, and trust me, they will go through a brick wall for you. And then after that, he knows, he jumps off to that table and he goes and runs and he grabs his ball, and we run around the backyard, and I play chase with him. Now he's like a Ferrari, and he can make really quick moves left and right. So in the backyard, when I'm chasing him around, I've eaten a few trees, because he runs and makes a left and I can't make a left that quick. And then I know when I hit the tree, he sits there and he drops the ball, and I know it. I can't see it, but I know he's doing it. He's laughing at me. So no, he's
Goliath.
Yeah, so he's not working all the time. It's only when he's got his harness on, and that's when and it's amazing. One of these days, if you guys can go down to the center, I mean, literally watch the difference. Stephanie maybe would be able to show you this, but watch the difference. You'll see a dog without the harness on, and you'll see him, and his tail is wagging and all that good stuff. And then watch him or her when you put the harness on. All of a sudden, the dog gets his game face on, and he's ready to roll. It's amazing.
Yep, definitely. Great question.
So another question real quick, and then I've encouraged people to go ahead and unmute themselves if they prefer that over the chat.
That'd be great.
But when you talk about a typical guide dog's working span being 9 to 10 years, that's from puppyhood, or that's from when he or she begins their?
When it's 9 to 10, I'm using that as that's about the age they are. I got both of my dogs when they were 2. And so normally by the time they're 9 or 10, they start slowing down, and then you really have to start taking a hard look at whether they're going to continue to be a guide. But most of the time, the dog will let you know when it's time. They'll either slow down, or when you say you want to go out inside and you can go for a walk, they might just lay there and look at you and say, I don't think so, bud. But they'll kind of let you know when, okay, I've done my thing. I was fortunate with my first one that he was with me for 12 and a half years. And he just loved the work. Goliath is the same way. When I get up in the morning and, I feed him water and relieve him and all that good stuff, I normally go to the hall tree and grab my shoes. As soon as I grab my shoes, he runs to the front door, because he knows we're going to go take a walk.
I think that's a very familiar experience for many people in this audience, right? The dogs know when we're ready to go do something.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Excellent.
Would anyone like to ask a question? Unmute themselves and ask a question?
Join us.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
I haven't bit anybody in almost 3 days now, so we're in good shape.
All right. Well, I'm sure something else will come up. When we talk about a dog, coming up or realizing that it's maybe time for a dog to retire. Tom, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's that like for you as the dog's partner when you have that realization. This dog has been such a tremendous part of your life. What's that process like for you?
You're only doing this just because you want to see a 6'3", 225-pound man get emotional again. So, I think, prior to this, we were kind of discussing how dogs work their ways into your life. I want you guys to remember something. These guide dogs are with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're with me more than my own wife. I think that that's by her preference, but that's either here or there. But he's with me all the time. He never leaves, he's with me all the time. He's my best friend. My first guide dog, like I said, I had for 12 and a half years, and we went through a lot of adventures, which were amazing. We walked in the Rose Bowl together. We went to Kona and we did an 18-mile outrigger canoe race. We had such great adventures, and he was so much a part of my life that it got to a point where I didn't know where my hand stopped and the harness started and vice versa. We were just that much of a team. Well, it got to a point when he was, like I said, about 12 and a half. I had him go in for his yearly physical. And I asked Yvonne Martin, who's the director of programs there, who was the senior trainer in my class at that time. I said, I think, what do you think? Should we check him out and see, if everything goes okay? Because he's going to be 14 years old, right? And she said, well, do you want to hear the answer? I said, no, I don't, but I'm going to have to. So she did, and she called me back. She did the assessment with the trainers down there, and they said it was time for him to retire. Not that he was in bad shape. He was still in good shape. He just had to go outside more often, but other than that, he was pretty good. And I said, okay. And fortunately for me, Guide Dogs of America has a great way of finding homes for the dogs. And so I was good. I had everything packed up for him. I had his bowl and his blanket and his toys and his half a bag of dog food ready. And Trish came to pick him up, and everything was fine. I carried everything out. And then I knelt down and looked at my dog, Wrigley. There's another story to this on how this whole adventure started. I won't get into that, but I used to put my hand behind his ear and scratch his ear, and he would take his paw and wrap it right over my forearm, okay, and kind of hold on to me. And I know that I heard him say to me, I kept my promise. Nothing ever happened to you on my watch, which is what he promised me when I first got him.
Yeah.
And then I was glad no one was around, because I cried like a big baby, and I had not cried since I was 5 years old, and that's no joke. And I get emotional thinking about it now, because he was such a special part of my heart and who I was as a person. He made me a better person. I think he made me a kinder person. And it was very, very tough for me to say goodbye to him. But then later, we started the new chapter with Goliath, and unfortunately, or fortunately, as Stephanie was saying, Goliath will be 7 this coming year, and albeit there's nothing wrong with him, he's still very athletic and very assertive. He makes really great aggressive moves when we're out there, and he's, like I said, he's a clown, and so hopefully I'll have him for many more years to go. But it's the downside to having a guide dog, is that you get so attached to him. I came within a hillbilly's heartbeat of not getting another dog because it was so traumatic. I had never I had never had anything like that happen to me where I literally broke down and cried the way that I did. It was quite pathetic.
How long between the time that Wrigley retired were you back in class?
About 5 months.
Okay.
It was actually fairly quick. We retired him in September, and then in January, I was told that I was going to start the January class in like October, December, something like that, or November, December. And then we started in January. And then I was a nervous wreck. And I know Yvonne actually was even more nervous because I was so close to Wrigley that she was worried that I would not take to a new dog, that I would say, well, Wrigley didn't do it this way. And no, this isn't working or whatever, because I was so attached to my first guide dog. But it didn't take very long because Goliath is just what he is. And it didn't take very long for me to have him become, a huge part of my life also. So, yeah.
Stephanie, we have some questions in the chat. You want me to read them to you?
Yes, please.
Yep. Yeah, let's
Okay.
do that.
Maybe these are more for you. I'm not sure. So one of them is Sue asked, what are the specific traits that you look for in a puppy or a guide dog puppy? And also at what minimum age of the dog can you determine their long-term trainability?
Gotcha. So let's see, what do we look for in a guide dog puppy? Well, I mean, we are a purpose-bred program, so all of the puppies that we bring into the world do go into the program. We're trying to give every dog a shot at it. Certainly there are some situations where we'll discover while the dog's still in the puppy home that there's just a fairly obvious temperament trait. The dog is consistently fearful of something, fill in the blank, right? Or sometimes there'll be medical issues where we have dogs that are released from the program before they go into training. So I'm not sure if that was the question or if it was more, how do we decide which dogs are going to go into the guide dog program versus the service dog program?
Yeah.
We do what we call a behavior checklist temperament test. It's a service dog temperament test, BCL for short. All of our litters are BCL tested before they go into puppy homes. And sometimes in that test, we'll see particular traits that will help us determine, this dog might be a stronger candidate for the service dog side versus the guide dog side, or vice versa. If we think about the service dog side, those dogs are often going to be doing like retrieval tasks. So if we see a puppy, I mean, granted, we breed mostly retrievers. So yes, they oftentimes all will have a strong tendency to want to retrieve. But if we see, that as being an especially pronounced trait, that will often be something that will go, hey, you know what? This dog may be better suited for the service dog track because of the type of work it's going to do. Similarly, if we see a dog that is, really, really phenomenal at offering eye contact, that's another really common skill on the service dog side. So that might be something that we consider, when we're placing puppies, determining which puppies will go into the guide dog side versus the service dog side. If we're oftentimes looking for across a litter, the dogs that appear at that time, because we all know that temperament tests when they're 8 weeks old or 7.5 weeks old just kind of give you a snapshot of the dog. It's not a for sure done deal of that dog's temperament. But if we see a particular puppy, or if we see puppies in that litter that are appearing in that moment to be more confident than others, those dogs will be the ones that we're more likely to keep on the guide dog side, just because of the complexity of the guide dog work. And the fact that a guide dog is often making those independent decisions with a different kind of support from the handler. When a dog's working with a handler that's blind, it's a little bit of a different relationship than a dog who's working with a sighted handler. I always joke that on the puppy training side, I have a love-hate relationship with the behavior leave it, because when the dogs are placed with clients who are blind, the client often doesn't, is not going to see what a sighted handler would see and be able to successfully cue leave it. So on the guide dog side, we're always reminding our puppy trainers, like, yes, we're going to teach this dog leave it, but be careful that you're not overusing leave it, because the end user of this dog is not going to find that skill to be as effective. So not to get too off track there, hopefully that answered their question.
Yeah, I think so. One question, I think you've addressed this a little bit. The puppy raisers, can they ever keep the dog they've raised? And I think you alluded
Yes,
to
if
that.
the dog is released from the program, if service dog life is not right for that dog, then the puppy raiser is our first call. And they are given the opportunity to adopt the dog back as a pet, and that's at no cost to them, as a token of our gratitude for having raised the puppy.
Yeah, great. Jane asks, are the guide dogs spayed or neutered? And are some dogs kept just for breeding?
A great question. Yes, so all of the dogs are spayed or neutered before they go into formal training to become guide dogs. But because we are a purpose-bred program, there are some dogs from litters, depending on the genetics of the dog, that instead of going into formal training, will be welcomed into our breeding colony as breeding stock.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another question from Sue. What determines being confident in a puppy? That is, what behaviors tell you that the puppy is confident?
So it's a number of different things. I mean, our behavior checklist test, we're going to look at, how does the dog respond to new people that it hasn't met? How does the dog respond, first of all, to just being in a brand new environment? So the dogs are born in our nursery. They spend their first 7 weeks living in a nursery, our nursery facility that has indoor-outdoor access, and they participate in a really complex enrichment and socialization, program from birth. But we will transport them from the nursery building to either the auditorium of our visitor education center, or sometimes we'll use a room up in our dorms. So we're looking at how does the dog react to just all of a sudden essentially being airlifted to a brand new location? How does the dog react to an umbrella suddenly popping open, a can of coins, shaking some coins? It's similar in a lot of ways to a lot of the different temperament tests that I'm sure the audience is, familiar with in picking a sport dog prospect. But we're looking at, a number of different responses to things like that.
Great, thanks. Jane asks, she has a question for Tom. Tom, do you do all the feeding and caring for your guide dog? And can family members help out?
Oh, great question.
Yeah, I take care of all of that. I mean, from the time I get up in the morning and all that. They can, my wife can feed him, but I prefer to do it myself. It would be a rare instance if she did. It's just kind of another one of those things where it makes you that much more attached to your dog because, labs are labs and they like to eat. And so they know that. So yeah, I take care of all. I brush them, clean up after them, et cetera, et cetera. And then, part of that grooming process is to make sure that when you're putting your hands on him, that you're actually touching the dog to feel, okay, does he have a scratch here or a burr there or a lump here or whatever? So yeah, I pretty much do all that. But I will say this, when my wife is home, Goliath follows her around like a little, tail, because at the end, it's kind of funny, but we get done eating. And as soon as we get done eating, Karen will push her plates forward. And as soon, because she's done this regularly, as soon as she does that, Goliath gets up and runs towards our laundry room and sits there and waits for her, because she goes in and he knows that she's going to give him a small little milk bone or something like that. But she still goes through the protocol of making him sit, holding the treat out there and not letting him take it until she gives the release command, which is okay. And then the dog will take it. But that's pretty much her extent of taking care of Goliath.
Good boy. Tom, you mentioned cleaning up after him.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if anyone else was going to ask this. So
I was, but
put it out there.
How do you find question?
I have a special radar detector that I use. And no, actually, it's really funny because that's one of the things I know you think, okay, well, they're going to teach you all this stuff about how to make a left turn and a right turn and all that good stuff. But how to clean up after a dog is something that they teach you. Now, they use marbles or whatever, but the bottom line is this. The dogs will go on command, okay, pretty much. I mean, I have Goliath on a a routine. I get up at 6 in the morning and I feed, water, relieve him, and then we do our walk. And then so again at 10, again at 1, again at 4, and then before I go to bed at 8, I take him out to relieve him. Now I know because I leave him on the leash. The leash we have, you can elongate, so it'll be a long leash or a short leash. You know, like when we're walking with the harness, it's on the short leash. But when I take him out of his harness and I put him on a long leash and I say, okay, get busy. That's his command to say, okay, let's find a spot. I gotta go. And then you'll know from that point, because he'll stop and I can feel it, and then I'll follow the thing, but you can also hear, okay, he's taking a whiz. And then I let him walk around and do his circles. And then when he stops again, I will come up and I will put my hand on his back, and you'll feel the hump in his back when he has to go. And then I point my left foot right at his right rear hip, okay? And then as soon as he does, I've got a bag on my hand and I reach down and I just kind of feel around, I grab it. Once I got it, I turn it inside out and I tie it all up and we're ready to roll.
Easy peasy. And in
Easy.
support of
What
that,
we all do in the dark anyway, right? It's-
Right,
yes,
right.
very
I mean,
much. Exactly.
it's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And in support of that, in the puppy homes, the puppy raisers are actually asked to teach the dogs to become comfortable or to familiarize the dogs with actually being touched, right? A hand going down their back when they're pooping. Because you can imagine if you don't practice that, the dog's going to find it a little bit like, hey, what are you doing? I'm taking care of business here. Come on now. You know, and as you reach your way down the dog's back and you get to the tail, you know, that's the business end. And if you go straight down, the poop should be in that general area. So that's actually something that the puppy raisers will begin to teach the dogs to be comfortable with.
It's funny.
What we
Great.
did at home was we have an area in the backyard because Wrigley was my first dog. We call it Wrigley Field. But we had it's about a 10 by 15 area that we put an inch and a half of charcoal with filter paper over that, and then 2 inches of gravel over top of that. And then right next to that is where I brush him, but that's his area. That's where I take him all the time. So it's very consistent. So when I go back there, he knows if he's already gone, the first thing he will do is he will jump up on the table because he wants to get brushed. But other than that, we go out there and that's his place to be relieved. And so it makes life a lot easier that I know exactly where I'm going and I'm in a certain area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the risk of sounding like a fecal obsessed club, we have another question from Jane. She says, so my dog poops on command and I say he's a good show dog because he does that. Do all guide dogs have to do this successfully to go to a working home? Is it a deal breaker if they don't go on command?
I would say, you know, for me, yeah, I don't think that if they would to do that, you know, and go on command or be put on a schedule, I think that would pretty much be a deal breaker. But here's the thing. They are taught from the time they're 8 weeks old how to do this. And so they learn and they're put on a schedule. I pretty much, you know, when you get home, your schedule might be a little bit different because of your work and things like that. But most of the time, that's not the thing that's going to break the deal, whether a dog is going to be a guide dog or not. It can be one of a lot of things. The dog might not like leathers, you know, and say, no, I'm not wearing that, right? No, most of them, I haven't heard of anybody or any of the dogs that have not learned how to do this because they're taught that from you know, as part of their potty training and they're put on this schedule.
Yeah, all of the puppy raisers are taught to leash relieve their dogs. And as someone who has raised every single one of my dogs in an apartment, when the dog does not have the luxury of just being turned loose in a yard to kind of sniff around and lollygag and, you know, take a sweet time to find the right spot, you know, when you consistently leash relieve, the dogs learn pretty quickly, hey, when we're out there in an area and we're given the cue to go, now's the time to take care of business. So I don't think in the 3 years I've been there, I don't think I've ever seen a dog released from the program because it had relieving issues where it wasn't like relieving, you know, at the right time.
And even though you have them on a schedule, you know, like I was telling you earlier, there are times when I'll be sitting there watching TV and Goliath will come up and he'll just kind of, you know, my hand will be on the corner. He'll come up and he'll lick my hand. And I go, oh, So you got to go, huh? And then he runs to the back door, and then we go outside and he does his thing. So a lot of times if he's got to go, he comes and tells me.
Yeah.
So Tom, do you and your wife, this is another question from the chat. Do you and your wife have any other dogs or cats?
No, ma'am. Goliath has a lot of traits of a cat because that and a border collie. He was raised with a cat and a border collie. So he likes to drag me around. He literally will put his mouth, not hard, but he'll just kind of put his hand and grab me by the hand and kind of say, let's go this way sometimes when we're playing. And then he will walk, when he wants some attention, he'll walk, I'll be sitting there and he'll walk right in front of my legs, back and forth like a cat, rubbing his side of his body up against my legs, just like a cat. So he has some of those types of things, and he's not really affected even when we're walking. If he sees a cat or something like that, no, he's working. He doesn't mess with that. So
Now, when Wrigley retired, you had the opportunity to keep him as a pet dog.
yes.
What led to your decision to ask GDA to contact his puppy raiser, and that's where he went, right? Did he go back to his raiser?
No, she couldn't do it. She already had she was one of those that already had a dog, right?
Gotcha.
That didn't make it, and he was he had some issues where there was some medication. She just couldn't
Okay.
take care of it. So
We found him a great home.
yeah, oh gosh, yeah. I don't know who they are. I didn't want to know. And actually Wrigley picked out who it was as far as that goes. But what made up my mind was this: is I used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would leave the house by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to get to work, because I live in Pomona and I had to go to View Park, Windsor Hills to go to work at Junior Blind of America. It's 48 miles, so it took me 2.5, 3 hours to get there. I would leave work at 5 and then not get home until 7:30, 8 o'clock. There was nobody else around the house at that time until my wife got home at say 5, and she left early. And by that time, Goliath or Wrigley was having to go outside much more
Right.
often, and we couldn't leave him outside or whatever. So we just decided it would be best if we, found someone else to let him enjoy the remaining times of his life. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. If I could have, trust me, I would have.
Yeah.
But then I sometimes wonder if I'm just rambling here right now, but I sometimes wonder if that would have not been a good thing, because Wrigley was so used to, the cues, when I would pick up the harness or go to the front door, he'd be there, and,
Sure.
and he knew we were going for a walk. And I sometimes wonder how he would have felt if I brought home another dog and then grabbed the harness and said, "Oh, no, Wrigley, you stay home
Left the house
today."
with him. Yeah.
I think it would have killed him, to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
He would have had such hurt feelings, you know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
So that's just me being a psychoanalyst, what can I say?
Yeah. No. Hey, everybody in this audience understands.
Stephanie, is it common for there to be other dogs in the household besides the working dog, besides the guide dog?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a number of our clients have resident pet dogs. Some of them will have, prior retired guides that they keep as pets. Some of them have other pet dogs. We just recently, one of our most recent graduates, I think she and her husband, I want to say, bred Chessies. So, they had a couple of Chesapeake Bay Retrievers in the house. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, because when I was in my class, we had a couple of people that did have dogs at home. One of the things that the trainers will do is they will go with them home so that they can properly introduce the dog to the new dog, the one that's at home, so they can make sure that they get along and stuff like that.
Smart. Great. Well, I think I'll give a last call for questions. Does anybody have a final question? We don't want to keep Stephanie and Tom all night. But
I know I will throw one more out there just
Okay.
because this is always our my little moment of public education.
All right.
Tom, can you share with us, or sort of a reminder, the public service announcement? What are the things that people should keep in mind when they're out in the world and they see a working guide dog or service dog?
Okie dokie. Well, one, when you see a guide dog working and he's got his harness on and we're working, ignore the dog. That's sometimes very hard to do, but you've got to do it. A lot of people will start calling the dog, oh, look at the dog. And trust me, if you do that, they're dogs and they're really good at their job. But they'll turn their head or something like that and look, and if they're not paying attention, I could end up eating a tree or a pole. That's not very fun. So don't call a guide dog or whatever. Secondly, when you see a guide dog, and even if the dog is laying there next to me and I'm waiting for a bus or whatever, don't walk up and start petting the dog. If you want to pet the dog, ask. As long as they've got the harness on, they're working, even if they're laying there. Ask me. And normally what I will do is I will say, okay. And then what I will do is I will stand and I'll make the dog sit, give him a command, because now he knows he's working, and then you can pet him. Now, if it's a kid, like 5, 6 years old, and I've had that happen when I was in line, I want to pet that dog, you know. Normally, when I have the time, I'll take actually the harness off of Goliath, and then that way he can actually play with the person. The other thing is that when you see a guide dog, don't feed them. You know, I don't care whether you've got a treat or whatever, and you're a dog lover, and maybe you've got some kibble. Don't feed the guide dog. These dogs are on a very specific diet. They're raised with it, they're kept on it. And all of you know that if a dog gets an upset stomach, that's not a lot of fun to clean up. And if you can't see it all, it's really a mess. So don't feed a dog, as far as that goes. And pretty much that will do it. Just understand that that dog is working, and he's trying to keep his end users, such as myself, safe. And it's important for them to concentrate on what they're doing. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you this, guys, you're all dog lovers, right? It is tough, very tough, when you see a beautiful lab or something like that, and he's as gorgeous as my dog. It is very tough not to come over and gush over him. You know what I'm saying? But it is what it is. And as an end user, I would appreciate it. Like you said, if you want me to stop, just say hello. I will, and then you can ask at that point.
Yep. Very good. Always a good reminder.
Yep. And people are leaving the meeting, so I'm getting boring. So it's time to go.
No. Stephanie, any closing thoughts or?
We just, thank you for the opportunity to spend a little time with everyone this evening. We are always looking for volunteers to help us raise puppies. We can't make these fantastic teams like Goliath and Tom without the very dedicated volunteers who first welcome these dogs into their homes and hearts. So if you want to learn more about our program, I would love to give you some additional information. We do monthly Zoom webinar information sessions. We've already done our November session, but our December session is on Saturday, December 5th at 10:30. Maybe what I'll do is I'll send the sign up link. I don't know if that's something that the club can share. I will go ahead and stop the screen share right now and maybe throw my email in the chat. If you guys have any questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to me directly. Let's see.
GDA-Colman has stopped screen share. New notification from Focus Assist when you were in full screen mode.
There you go. You can hear some of that assistive technology in the background.
That was my Jaws talking in the back. And then puppy raisers. We always need puppy raisers. They're the foundation of what we do. I always call them the mentally irregulars because they raise a dog from the time they're 8 weeks until they're about 15, 16 months old. And now they're perfect, and then they give them away. But without puppy raisers, I don't have a guide dog. And so if any of you want to do that, please get a hold of Stephanie, because it's like I said, that you teach them the fundamentals. After you teach them all the fundamentals and the basics, then they go to what Stephanie always calls, they go to college and then they learn the rest. So if you're interested, make sure you do that, because as far as I'm concerned, I would sure appreciate it, because without puppy raisers, I wouldn't have my beautiful dog.
Absolutely. And I always say when you've raised the dog and you're turning it back in for formal training, you're not giving the dog up, you're giving the dog forward.
Mhm. That's nice. That sounds like a good place to end.
Yes.
Thank
Well,
you guys.
Thank you all
Thank
very
every-
much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Stephanie. We're all applauding, mostly under mute, so I will.
Well,
But thank you so much for
Thanks
sharing your
having
time with
It
us,
was
and we look forward to maybe hearing from you again. Great.
Okay.
very good. Awesome.
Stephanie's email is in the chat, so or you can always ask me for it if you need it, and hopefully maybe we'll get some volunteers from the.
Yeah, we would love to work with VHOC members as puppy raisers. Join us.
Yeah. Okay. All
Thanks,
right.
Dave.
Thanks.
Talk to you guys later.
All
Tom,
righty. Thank you.
Have a good
Bye,
weekend.
Tom. All
You
right.
got it. Bye-bye. Pleasure
Bye.
meeting them.
All righty. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
With that, good night, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
We'll see y'all next time.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Bye.
O2, end meeting or leave meeting. Leave meeting button.